Well, hello, dear friends, and welcome back to the weirdest freaking timeline. If you've been living under a rock, and at this point I'm not sure I would advise against that, just for the sake of one's sanity, everybody and their mother is getting fired lately for saying or doing a scandalous thing. Now, some of these are probably warranted, and some of them probably less so. That, in and of itself, is a great big old bucket of worms that I am certainly not touching until the next video. But I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. From the countless figures accused of harassment and blacklisted under the ongoing hashtag #MeToo campaign, to the firing of people like Roseanne Barr and James Gunn for, well, to put it lightly, less than savory tweets? Okay, this one probably just outright deserves it because goddamn how stupid can you be? The firing, or resignation I suppose I should say, of former Georgia Representative Jason Spencer because he got so duped by Sacha Baron Cohen in the current year. It is not 2001 for fuck's sake, that he thrust his bare ass at him while screaming about America and dropping full-on hard R N-bombs on national television.
Las chanclas, todo despeinado porque no me dio tiempo nada ponerme las chanclas y el bañador. Voy a la playa, había subido la marea. Eso.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What the fresh hell were you thinking, lad? But speaking of fresh, or at least so the marketing says, and the accursed N-word, today we're going to be looking at a specific example in this carnival of castigation with the case of Papa John's, public outrage, public relations, and try to answer the general question, is the customer always right? As many of you have heard, pizza has recently become another thing to be politicized because what the hell isn't a political issue anymore? To set the stage for this, though, we have to go back to last year, when the NFL protests of the United States national anthem were put on in a display of pointless virtue signaling from multimillionaires, were placed in solidarity, Black Lives Matter, over the typically warranted police use of violent force. I mean the rampant racism across all cops who were trained to hate black people. But before we stop there in 2017, I think we need to go back a little bit further. All the way back to 1984, which, given the topic du jour concerning wrongthink and hate speech, is certainly an apt year. But I'm talking again about the year, not the book 1984, nor the Apple commercial. In 1984, Ghostbusters was delighting children who would later become disgusted with what, well, the franchise would become, and come to feel the same way in regards to other franchises which saw releases in that same year, so far ahead in our futuristic age of reboots, remakes, and rampant cynicism, and generally movies making me want to be dead, including Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Terminator 2. At least Gremlins is safe. Oh no. Anyway, Prince's Purple Rain is blowing up radio waves while Bill Cosby is creeping into people's bedrooms and living rooms. I mean, probably literally, but figuratively as well, with the airing of The Cosby Show starting that year, and establishing himself as America's dad, long before he would establish himself as America's creepy uncle.
I'm dead serious. Haven't you ever noticed that after one of my barbecues and they have the sauce, people want to get right home? Let me tell you something else. I got a cup of it up on the night table. I got a cup of it, I said.
But of interest to us today, in a broom closet in his father's struggling tavern in Indiana, 23-year-old John Schnatter began making pizza pies. Yes, an optimistic young man of German heritage teamed up with Italian culture to accomplish his dream of putting things in ovens. Excuse me. Now, restaurants are a risky business, although probably not as risky as you may have heard, particularly given the outright falsehoods that are spread, for example, by this American Express advert, disseminating that 95 or 90% of restaurants fail within the first year or so. But as Luo and Stark, 2014 found, while restaurants do tend to have a failure rate of 17%, not 90, within the first year of operation, generally leading towards a median amount of time in business of about 4.5 years, yeah, it's still not the safest job option. While that 17% and 4.5-year half-life is actually longer and more secure than some other types of startup businesses, small restaurants with less than 5 employees are statistically more likely to fail faster. Yet despite the challenges that Schnatter, who funded his pizza ovens with the $1,600 he made from selling his 1971 Camaro to keep his father's own existing tavern afloat while expanding into the sales of pizza, yeah, he was kind of going against the odds of actually succeeding in the restaurant industry. And 34 years later, Papa John's is the 4th largest chain of pizza restaurants in the United States, falling behind Little Caesars, Pizza Hut, and my boy, how many levels of libertarian are you on? I don't know, like 5, maybe 6? You are like a little commie. Watch this, road. And by that, of course, I'm referring to the fact that Domino's is now actually paving the roads.
Roads? Well, we don't need roads.
And Domino's as well. Woo-wee lads, get prepared for Domino's and their libertarian pothole filling. Company founder Tom Monaghan's no porn and no abortions allowed here, you filthy degenerate.
Degenerates like you belong on a cross.
Planned Catholic utopian community, Ave Maria, kind of ends up landing them in a similar situation as the one I'm discussing here, with some negative public backlash because how dare you have any conservative values? Anyway, Domino's aside, Papa John's has over 5,000 locations worldwide since its founding in 1984, 3,600 of which are in the US alone. Papa John's is so ubiquitous that in only 34 years of business, nearly every podunk town or village in America, in so-called flyover country, can be expected to have at least a relatively local Papa John's restaurant. Say what you want about the quality of the pizza or its price, which is usually what turns me away from them more than anything, as I can just as easily go to Parvis Caesarius because it's of about similar quality of being greasy, cheesy garbage, but also cheap as fuck, and hey, they also have this amazing crap. It is certainly decent, though, Papa John's. It's not Gordon Ramsay cringe-worthy. It's okay. The point is, though, that Papa John's as a franchise is about half as old of all of her top competitors, all of which opened between 1958 and 1960. And beyond your opinion of the product, I think it's unquestionable that the American dream-esque nature of the founder and namesake Papa John Schnatter is one of the reasons why the brand has become so beloved across this nation. He lived the American dream, kind of, right? So, hopping back into our DeLorean, although Back to the Future wouldn't be released until the next year, let's return to the current year +3 - 1, 2017. Papa John has this massively successful company, and similarly to the founder of Domino's, remains a relatively down-to-earth, religious person, conservative, who is unafraid to occasionally voice his support of various conservative and right-wing politics, including his criticisms of the Affordable Care Act in 2012, his public support of Mitt Romney in the same year, and a $1,000 donation to Donald Trump himself in the 2016 campaign. Really, Papa? $1,000? Donald Trump probably didn't even degrease his pizza stuffed crust from Pizza Hut back in 1995 with a stack of Benjamins, let alone a mere measly $1,000. Wowee, step up your game. Watching someone eat pizza like this is like a mind virus. It, really messes up my head. I mean, I know why you were eating it that way, Mr. Trump, but Jesus Christ, how horrifying. Although, it's still not as awful as this horrifying soy boy.
I've heard that New Yorkers aren't supposed to eat pizza with a knife and fork, but, I don't want to get grease all over my hands. I have to use my fingers for tweeting and checking my Facebook, so I do use a knife and fork a lot when I eat pizza.
Despite being involved in some privately settled out-of-court sex scandals over the years, speaking of Trump, Schnatter began to see a bit more scrutiny from the mainstream media last fall when he criticized the NFL for, quote, poor leadership in the handling of player protests. Given that Papa John's was a major sponsor and partner of the NFL, they were the official pizza of football. Schneider pointed to decreased sales during peak game season as his rationale for why the company was not performing as profitably as anticipated. And of course, immediately, Schneider was lambasted and vaguely accused of being a racist at worst, or insensitive at best, for daring to raise a quite valid concern regarding his business, because I guess unlike some people, he appears to give a shit about putting profits before public political proselytizing, and it should be obvious why his point was valid, but let's make it clear. What do Americans eat a grotesque amount of when they sit back to watch the game? Pizza and wings.
If you can finish this plate of wings in under 3 minutes, I will give you my prized possession, Coach Dicka's original hip.
Nice item.
Yeah, still has some of the meat on it.
Football season is pizza prime time, with Domino's estimating a sales increase on Super Bowl Sunday over a typical Sunday weekend by 350%, with an estimated 11 million slices sold on that day alone based on data from 2016. But the viewership for the 2017 NFL season was down almost 10% from the previous year, with a typical game seeing 1.6 fewer million viewers. That's 3 million eyes away from the hand egg, and that means a lot of mouths also not being filled with pizza. Papa John's numbers reflected this, with sales down 3.9% and stocks down 7% in Q3 of 2017. But the reality of Schneider's concerns don't matter, because come on, feels before reels these days, right? But that was the first nail in the coffin of racism that the Papa John's board certainly was eager and willing to bury their own founder in. Now, I know I've already been a bit long-winded here, but in addition to trying to make this story somewhat amusing, I think we need to clarify the history here for a number of reasons. Again, John Schneider is an icon of the self-made American businessman, yes, but he's also a conservative and a practicing Christian. And now here he comes out as one of the few voices in the public to stand up in a reasonable and rational manner to the anti-American sentiments being espoused tacitly or indirectly by the NFL and her various teams, to the obvious and measurable disgust of millions of those people in the said flyover states that Dems may not care for, but who come together as friends, family, and communities every Sunday to watch a good skull cracking in the Coliseum as they eat Papa John's pizza. Those people have a hell of a lot of pride in their country, and they don't take too well to seeing their favorite teams, to whom they have certainly paid a lot of money for tickets or merchandise, disrespect and degrade this nation. A lot of those people were very impressed with Schneider's stance, but the company board clearly was not. As quickly, and in something of a hushed manner, Schneider stepped down as CEO, becoming chairman of the board, despite maintaining his 29% of shares in the Papa John's Corporation. Perhaps Schneider was just ready for a less active role in the company that he founded? I mean, he's stepped down before, so it's possible. While Papa John's ended its sponsorship with the NFL, supposedly mutually, to me it is unquestionable that a decision was made at that point to kill the John in Papa John's, and the entire board seemed on board with it, from the second that he dared, and rightly so, criticize the NFL's anti-American attitude. In May of 2018, Schneider was in a conference call with a representative from a public relations group called Laundry Service in regards to the company's reputation following the said NFL fallout. Now, despite the supposed endorsement of Papa John's by the Daily Stormer, you'll see occasionally cited as proof that Papa John's is the official za of the alt-right, and, just saying, if you want to use Stormer articles as evidence of someone or something being fascistic mainstream media, well then the Wall Street Journal is the true spiritual successor of Der Stürmer. The company, obviously, that being Papa John's, in no way publicly supported the alt-right or any kind of reactionary right-wing politics. But Schneider did support a common opinion shared by many, that the NFL was acting in an unprofessional manner without leadership. A lot of average people appreciated what Papa John's had done in taking a public stand, no matter how minor and milquetoast, against the mob mentality that only racists don't kneel for the symbol of their nation. including while they are representing said nation in the one that we rebelled and revolted to gain our independence. But let's look at this in an empirical way. While you can see there was an initial backlash if we look at the stock prices following Schneider's statements on the NFL, by January, things were on an upward swing, and at least leveling off. However, by May, the company was facing stock price losses again. Now, in part that's because, hey, guess what? Football season's over. But I'm sure the board saw this as a perfect time to sacrifice the racist figurehead as a scapegoat for the loss in stock prices when, well, there was really very little evidence for his responsibility, and arguable evidence to the opposite. But thus, in May, Schneider spoke to this PR guy, and during the call he said, quote, "Colonel Sanders called black people niggers." That is a quote, but that's it. He didn't call someone that word. He didn't say that he hates people who that word describes. He didn't say he wanted someone to get raped by those people. He just dared to utter a word in context.
And that's the problem. It has to become a bad word for everybody. I hate it when black leaders are just like, oh, we're getting rid of it. Everybody's got to stop saying it. No one, like rappers will still say it because you told them not to. That's what makes them badasses. Like, everybody's got to start saying it. Everyone, like white people, you guys have got to start saying the N-word. You guys got to start saying it. We will lose some of you in the process.
And astoundingly, once again, it may turn out that context for which Forbes that dropped this hit piece provided none actually fucking matters. So, on July 11th, after typical excessive backlash from the progressive left, who were, of course, offended to near hysterics by an adult man properly using the English language instead of infantile baby talk that inevitably, as Louis C.K. has said, oof, there's another one of those hashtag me too motherfuckers, is just white people getting away with being able to say nigger.
It's bullshit, because when you say the N-word, you put the word nigger in the listener's head. That's what saying a word is. You say the N-word and I go, oh, she means nigger. You're making me say it in my head. Why don't you fucking say it instead and take responsibility?
Shares in the company dropped by 5.9% in a matter of hours. Schneider quickly resigned his position as chairman of the board and apologized for the offensive language, although he insisted he did nothing wrong. Because, you know, he did nothing wrong. But of course, that doesn't matter a lick to those out for blood, as the outrage mob is wont to do. No, they had to bury this self-made man, and not just the social media socialites. The board clearly had it out for him as well. Since his resignation, Papa John's said it would remove the 56-year-old executive's likeness from its logo and promotional and marketing materials. Additionally, Major League Baseball has discontinued its Papa Slam promotion with the chain, and at least 12 Major League Baseball teams, including the Yankees and the Mets, have dropped their local sponsorships. But it can't stop there now, can it? You can't just destroy the business itself, you have to destroy the man. Schneider's hometown school, University of Louisville, said it would remove his name from its football stadium, the new name to be Cardinal Stadium. And CBS News reports that the University of Kentucky, which houses the John H. Schneider Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise, will no longer be called that. The mayor of Jeffersonville, Indiana, Mike Moore, the town where Schneider was born, returned a $400,000 donation from Schneider to restore the Nashland Fieldhouse, a historical gym and recreational center. Yeah, you heard that right. The mayor of his hometown just pissed away nearly $500,000 buckaroonies to prove to his constituents that, while the word may not be mightier than the sword, it certainly is mightier than the dollar when the re-elections are right around the corner, and you gotta be sure that everyone knows what a good boy rhino you are, because Republican voting in your town is down in the polls, 37 to 63. Yeah, what a strange coincidence that 2 months after getting trounced in the primary, the mayor of Jeffersonville became more concerned with signaling his virtue to Democrat voters than a $400,000 upgrade and restoration project to a local landmark. And please share this shit, guys, because as far as I know, I'm the only person who's made this connection that this motherfucker knows he's about to get voted out of office and that's why he's doing this crap. if you live in Indiana, don't allow this garbage to go through unchallenged. But hang on, Abe. Schneider certainly deserved everything he got, right? I mean, he said not just a racial slur, he said the worst, the grand poobah of all racial slurs, and it's just unacceptable, even if it was used in context and not in a derogatory manner. He should have still known better than to have uttered a word in the English language, right? Same with that Jason Spencer ding-dong, except they're completely different situations, and Jason Spencer deserves everything he gets, in my opinion. Again, how did you fall for this? But, more interestingly, since resigning, Papa John has begun to potentially rise from the oven's ashes as Punish Papa, a fallen founder, now suing the corporation for conducting and coordinating a coup against him. According to Schneider, the laundry service PR rep requested $6 million from the company or else he would, quote, bury the founder. Since the beginning of his retaliation against the company that he built by his own hands, Schneider has said, I was just repeating what somebody else said. I was actually kind of provoked. And that, further, quote, they were promoting that kind of vocabulary. They kept hitting it, and I was like, no, we're not going to do that. That's not what we're about. Additionally, and potentially most damning and big, if true, Schneider said that the laundry service representative repeatedly used the word himself. Quote, by the fourth or fifth pass, I just said, no, we're not going to be part of any such thing. So-and-so used the N-word. We don't use the N-word, and we're not gonna use the N-word, and that's it, he said. Now, I imagine this is gonna be a long time coming, but let's take a step back because right now, as I mentioned, we're in a veritable shitstorm of firings and financial crises from every political direction as the public relations needle spins uncontrolled and unhinged across the political gauge for a new scapegoat or martyr every single fucking second depending on your own political outlook. But as people become outraged in the wake of waves of finger pointing, is there any actual long-term impact of said outrage on businesses' financial success? Do these outrage campaigns work? Is the customer always right? Are these people even customers? Well, what if they're wrong? Can one vote with one's wallet over a controversy and ultimately, though, change the course of an industry? I know, as always, I'm rambling here a bit, but the story of Papa John's is a perfect introduction to this concept, particularly given how it has embroiled the media for weeks now, with a new celebrity from Hollywood being ousted for pedophilic comments, or getting into a bit of a Me Too thing, or on the flip side being called, you know, as you do, a Nazi, racist, bigot, or if you're Dan Harmon, all three at once. Congratulations, Dan Harmon, you win the gold-plated Cupid doll on that one, Danny old boy.
Oh, now you fucked up. Now you fucked up. Now you fucked up. You have fucked up now. Now you fucked up. 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 Now you have fucked up.
Seems though that every company is catching fire under guilt by association of late, and many have been more than willing to do something about it by firing or terminating people who they're associated with. But I want to leave all of those specific examples, particularly of Hollywood, till the next time. And for now, let's just address the general idea of what is going on when a company disassociates itself from an employee or member of its organization over his or her conduct based on political pressure from social media, based on public relations. Is the customer king? Well, let's keep on with a case of Papa John's. On the day of Schneider's resignation from the restaurant chain, stocks rose 11%. Keep in mind that stocks previously had dropped 5.9% following the release of the Forbes article. Well, obviously, the public crucifixion of Schneider worked, and they showed their appreciation for his swift removal in cash and raised stock prices. Except, womp womp, fast forward a few days later and ooh, what's this? Since hitting the lowest point in stock value after the article's publication, shares were down an additional 12% over the past month, placing the company in significantly more dire straits financially than before John's resignation. Now, maybe that's in part because Forbes then went ahead and published another article or expose to get a little bit more of that Me Too topping for their PR nightmare pie, but I digress. The point is, Thus far, there's evidence that reacting to the demands of the social media mass was not in the restaurant chain's best long-term interest, as, well, they're worse off now than they ever were before in terms of stock prices, despite close to a year of major decline in sales that began before Schneider's original critique of the NFL. In this case, those who may appear to be the customer with that original leap in stock prices were not only wrong, they weren't even your damn core customers. And therein lies a big part of this issue. When we say the customer is always right, we have to be referring to people who are actually your customers. Like I said, Middle America thrives on the affordable, cheesy goodness to accompany their sport ball and beer throughout the fall season. Those are the people who buy Papa John's pizzas regularly, not the kind of blue checkmark dipshits who ponder in lamentation on social media about how difficult it must be for the poor slobs of this nation to live on a mere 7 limes from Whole Foods for a whole week on Twitter as they munch down upon their morning avocado toast, almonds fully activated. So, while the Papa John's Corporation got a congratulatory "You're sufficiently not racist today, ask again tomorrow" bump in stock price, it quickly dissipated in value because people like this.
This place does amazing small plates. Get in here, everybody. Ooh.
It's a fennel kimchi flatbread with shishito peppers served on a vintage Dylan vinyl.
It's a mascarpone panna cotta on a raspberry Kool-Aid served on a mustache.
Don't eat food like this. Except when they're doing that insufferable public display about how bad they're being, right?
You gotta make sure that everyone's on board with it. It's like, if I get fries, you'll have a couple, right? If I get fries for the table, I know you'll have fries if I get fries. Should we do it? Yeah, let's be bad. Come on, let's do it. All right, we're gonna take a plate of fries. It's like a group of couples agreeing to do ecstasy together.
This guy is not your average weekly Papa John's consumer. So already we're seeing that it may not be in the best interest of a company to immediately react to social media outrage when it comes to their long-term business success. But why do companies fall for this pressure if it is so short-lived? I would argue it's at least in part due to the paradigm of customer as king, or the customer is always right. And the error occurs not only in that these are not only your customers when it comes to something like Papa John's, but that they ever were or ever would be. But further, there are other harms to a business that can occur no matter how stellar the customer's approval rating is, and all of those issues may in fact occur or be exacerbated because of the sacrifice of other values and concerns to the altar of the unattainable deity of perfect customer satisfaction. While we will of course be looking at the hard data, let's start with the concept behind customer satisfaction. What is it? Why does it matter to companies? And why is the customer so often crowned king of the corporate castle? The term "the customer is always right" was originally coined in 1909 by Harry Gordon Selfridge, the founder of Selfridge's department store in London, and has since become a widely accepted truth or myth, depending on how you would like to define it, by many companies and business owners, if not practice, then in pretense. If any of you have ever worked in retail, as is typical of most young people, you may not have ever actually heard this phrase directly, but it's often an unspoken rule. Of course the customer is right. But is it accurate? Is ensuring every customer is always satisfied and that their needs are met first and foremost the model upon which companies thrive? Dr. Thomas Sorell, a scholar of the study of business ethics, wrote a short treatise on this concept in 1994, ultimately concluding that the customer is, in fact, not always right, but that to maintain such a practice is unfeasible financially long-term. He notes that the portrayal of the customer as king comes equally with its opposite, seemingly diametrically opposed, yet complementary portrayal of the customer as victim. That is, when the needs of the customer are always placed first, this tendency assumes not only that the customer is incapable of fault in any aspects of the exchange, but that there is no instance under which the customer could be responsible for detrimental effects to the business. At some point then, Sorell argues, companies will inevitably, if they follow this model, spend more on accommodating customers than they will exchange receive back in customer loyalty, something that we will, again, examine empirically in the future. Sorell goes on to raise the notion of the moral cost of capitulation to consumer demands. Well, in the exemplar we looked at today, Papa John's, such demands to change a product to suit the political or moral designs of people who usually are not even your customers is not new to us. We've seen plenty of examples before. For instance, even prior to the explosion of pedophilic claims and remarks, Scarlett Johansson was essentially forced to resign from a role in a film where she was to portray a person who was arguably transgender. And I do mean arguably because, to be honest, the person in question, a real person, Dante Tex Gill, was probably just a butch lesbian who didn't take shit from nobody and liked to wear suits and be called Mr., in which case, I guess Mr. Saavik is trans too?
Any suggestions, Admiral?
Prayer, Mr. Saavik. The Klingons don't take prisoners.
Oh, and a pedophile. Oh, we're coming full circle with this Me Too shit now, lads. Dear God, Saavik, he's only 2 days old, woman. Stop with the sensual finger touching. We're talking finger pointing only here today. Anyway, the point about morality is the movie might now not even get made because it lacks star power behind it. So congratulations to you, trans activists, on that big win.
And that's not the fault of the movie industry, really. That's culture, and it's movies getting more and more afraid because movies make less and less money. Even though the huge movies make more money than ever, the little movies don't make as much. And a risky movie with a crazy concept like
Rub and Tug.
You better fucking believe they're gonna cast Scarlett Johansson because they need the movie to work.
Sorell, though, brings up a different, if related, aspect of morality, though. That being the sale of violent, hardcore pornography. While there may be demand for such content, and, well, we've all used the internet, and while content may actually be being produced in a safe environment, Sorell suggests that business owners should decide for themselves if they desire to carry such products, as it may violate their personal standards of ethics, and that there is no moral obligation for companies or business owners to carry products or provide services that they morally disagree with. Well, that sure sounds like a great ethical argument against the gay cake now, done it? Except, no, not exactly, because even in 1994, minority-oriented discrimination, because the word discrimination is not inherently bad, look up the definition, here it is. Perceived or otherwise, though, minority-oriented discrimination was distinguished from any other form of being discriminating. As Sorell continues on in his treatise in mentioning a customer's preference to be served by employees of the same race as grounds for denying service to said customer. I actually agree, but I agree as well that you should be able to deny service for any reason you so feel fit. And interesting as well, because guess what? I got a stats for you. And this is important here because it's a bit related to the whole N-word fiasco, as well as another exemplar that we'll look at here in a little bit. But is it true then, Aiden, that white people are just terrible bigots and that it's morally cost-effective to denounce and deny service to them if said bigotry be caught a whiff of? To say, no, Mr. Whitey, if you prefer to have a white server, you're not allowed to eat here. By the way, yes, I will bake your cake. Well, Lynn and Sturman in 2011 were interested in this topic and examined the potential for racial preferences to affect customer service satisfaction or to negatively affect ratings of minority employee performance and the businesses that employ them, let alone or say nothing of minority-owned businesses that receive government incentives to, just exist. But anyway, they found, guess what? Sorell was right. White people do in fact perceive white employees as more prompt and attentive in the field of restaurant service than black employees. However, the same was true of black people in that black people reported black servers as being more prompt and attentive than white servers. Neither race differed significantly in their ratings of the server attractiveness or friendliness, only of the quality of service. Wowee, it's almost like we're a tribalistic species and we gravitate towards those more similar to us as kin. In other words, everyone's a little bit racist.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
It's just human nature. I would point out, though, that the two factors of appearance and friendliness in this study were truncated into a single variable labeled as disposition, and I would like to see the expanded data to see if any of that inherent natural human racial preference appeared in one aspect over the other, but again though, it's not really racism so much as it is in-group preference. In-group love, not out-group hate. So yeah, everyone has a preference, but that seems to have little impact beyond thinking those more similar to you are better at doing their jobs. It doesn't create hatred of unsatisfied customers in those of other races. I mean, gay cakes in fact do get baked every day, and it apparently took some effort to even find a place that didn't want to bake a custom pride pastry. But Sorell continues to question the morality of the necessity of an individual creator, owner, or entrepreneur to meet the demands of his or her patrons. For example, is an artist morally obligated to change a work of creativity and art because it does not completely align with the vision or the design of the person who funded it?
Why? I just don't get it. I always catch you fuckers watching this sick shit. This is sickening.
What about a chef? Is he or she required to change the recipe and broil his fish when his heart intended to bear his soul on a plate grilled? Get it?
A waiter asked if you would broil the soul.
Yeah, that's
remember that?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, when he asked you that question, did you make a face by any chance?
I may have made a small face.
You made a small face?
Sure.
Should he fundamentally alter his dish because it was requested by some plebeian idiot sandwich with no respect for the art of cooking? Well, I don't know. This is a philosophy and ethics discussion here today, friends. We're staying mostly out of the hard, heavy data yet, but let's move on to customer expense. That being a bit more measurable, and I like to measure things. The common idiom of the customer is king would suggest it's always better to please a customer than to leave them angry and unsatisfied. Particularly, it would seem in the age of social media, that is obviously the case. I mean, you don't want a bad Yelp review now, do you?
Yelp has killed us. Yelp has trashed us terribly. They're also deleting 5-star reviews. Oh, come on.
But Sorell mentions instances where not accommodating a customer is actually of financial benefit to a company, citing the trend of airline overbooking as a result of poor customer behavior affecting the bottom line of airlines, at least similarly as it was in 1994. Noting that customers often book flights on multiple airlines that they obviously cannot all board in total, instead picking and choosing which flight they actually want to board and fly at their own convenience. As a result, airlines began the practice of overbooking in anticipation that many passengers would be absent, predicting that overbooking and rescheduling, in the off chance every ticket holder is present, would ultimately present fewer negatives than being constantly underbooked and not having butts in seats. Sorell argues that this was a logical, if not even necessary, action by airlines to combat just outright crappy customer behavior, and that neither side was morally in the right here, instead seeming to meet in an impasse of, well, this is what we do now. But doesn't that seem contradictory for long-term business success, though? We always hear about the worst-case customer service scenarios in the media. They make mainstream national television news. After all, I mean, what can be more detrimental to an organization in the long run than a PR nightmare like this? I mean, just take a guess. What's going to be worse for the bottom line? An egregious miscarriage of justice with, for example, a physician and paying customer being dragged, tased, and pulled from his place on a flight versus a few empty seats? Well, in the case of United Airlines, which is now not only being sued by the doctor in question, but by the officers who pulled him off, that has to have had a negative impact on the company at large, right? Except it really hasn't. Despite a short-term decrease in stock value in 2017, the organization United Airlines has continued in an upward trend since this international headline met similar cries of racism and police brutality last year, just as Papa John has been lambasted for being a racist this year. Look, there's a ton more to cover. this is going to be a multi-part series because, well, it seems every day there is more and more information. There is another person who is being labeled as a wrong thinker, as a Nazi, as a bigot, as a pedophile, as whatever. Some of those may be accurate, but just as many are mere social media outrage. And we're going to get into the entire idea of whether or not it's accurate, whether or not it's right to fire somebody. Is that good for the bottom line? Is it good for a business? Is it good for society? But right now, let's just look at Papa John's. Better ingredients, better shut your fucking mouth. How dare you use the English language?
No, he was a fucking slave who was whipped, and his name was Nigger Jim. That's how bad his life was.
Yes,
so if you take nigger out of Nigger Jim's name, you're softening the reality of what life was like then. And you're taking away what was great about Mark Twain's humor.
Right.
Is that he reduced the misery of not only black people, but of all poor people in the South. He took that context and made colorful, beautiful, funny stories inside of that of this barefoot kid who's fucking starving. And he's a dynamic, interesting character. And his friend Nigger Jim has a voice. Nobody else was writing for Nigger Jim
It
then.
softens the whole conflict that the kid is feeling too because then it's like, oh, it's just Jim.
Yeah,
Who
it's just his
cares?
friend Jim. No, this guy's life is so bad that he actually has to say, hi, my name is Nigger Jim.
From what I've described so far, from the philosophy of Tom Sorell, does it sound like what John Schneider did was really in any way somehow outside of what was good for his business? I'm not saying the N-word outright. Now, it certainly seems as if we could question whether or not that was set up as a coup by the board, but there does appear to be some evidence there, at least if you are to believe John. But moreover, it appears that the attempt to destroy the man began last fall, when he dared to have the cojones to be one of the very few people to stand up while the NFL kneeled. And sure, that wasn't everyone's cup of tea. I get that it was politically divisive and he kind of started it. But he did not come out of this from a racist position. He was looking at the bottom line of his company and saying, hey, look, our sales are down and NFL viewership is down. We are disappointed in the lack of leadership in the NFL, and if you can't get your shit together, we're going to have to find another partner. I don't think he did anything wrong, and I don't think most Americans did as well, considering how many of them not only didn't want to watch the 2017 NFL season, how many of them outright were burning their merchandise in protest.
Now, think about that, and think about the millions a year that you people are making to play a game. Well, we've got soldiers overseas that get paid minimum wage to put their lives on the line for that flag. Protest does not belong in our NFL sports. It's a game. If you want to protest, fine. Take a legal protest to the streets. Contact your congressman. Go to the courts. Do whatever you feel like you need to do. But here's what I feel like I need to do, and I'm taking it in action, and I mean it. And you can see it right there, because that's the last of my Chiefs gear, and that's all I've got to say.
I think we've set the stage here, though. It appears that we already have some decent anecdotes, if not outright evidence, that the customer is not always right. And particularly, it may not be in the interest of a corporation to bend over backwards for customers who are, well, not customers. But there is a lot to dig into here, as I've said, so I'm gonna leave you with some of these questions for now. So far, we've seen some initial evidence, but there's a hell of a lot more to be tackled. What about capitulating to the consumer in terms of providing free goods or services to say I'm sorry? Does that help? Is there a long-term benefit in firing employees who don't meet standards when the standards of the customer are absurd? I'll be answering these questions and more in the second part of the series. This is supposed to be a two-parter. It's looking like it's going to be a hell of a lot longer than that. But if you've enjoyed this first part on the customer is not always right, please be sure to stay tuned, to like and to subscribe. I'm Aiden Paladin, all ton of volts.
Pizza time.